Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Produce Buzzers podcast. We are so happy you have joined us today, and I think you will be too after the show is over, because you will learn a lot about fresh fruits and vegetables, how to select and store them, how to prepare and cook them, and surprising facts about their history and origin. We hope it inspires you to eat more fresh fruits and vegetables, not only for your health, but also for your delight and pleasure as you explore their amazing world of taste and delicious flavors. Eating more of them will transform your life in so many positive ways. So settle back, relax, and get ready for another delicious adventure with the Produce Buzzers. Greetings, Produce Buzzers podcast fans, and welcome to another delicious episode of the Produce Buzzers podcast. I'm Edwin Stepp, your host and executive editor of producebuzz.com. I'm joined once again by the president and founder of Produce Buzz, Teresa Nolan, along with Rick Stepp and Cynthia Benedetto, both contributing editors to Produce Buzz. Now, listeners, May is Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. So we have a guest today who is going to enlighten us on the great contributions Japanese Americans made to agriculture in the United States, beginning in the late 19th century and continuing on today. Our guest today is Glenn Tanaka, who is a third-generation Japanese American farmer, continuing the legacy of his family's farms in Southern California. We also have one of his good friends, Ron Inatomi, who is also one of our good friends and one of our best fans for the show. And we really glad we have both of them on to talk about this Heritage Month. Glenn's farm is situated in the midst of the urban sprawl of Irvine, California, and has survived the pressures of residential and commercial development in that area for decades. For over 40 years, he's operated the farm and has kept it thriving. His son has now joined him in the business and is set to keep it going for another generation. Glenn is committed to keeping the farm thriving, not just to grow food, but using it to educate the citizens of Orange County and beyond about farming, especially young people and students, not just Japanese Americans, but all who wish to come and learn. He regularly brings classes from the region to visit his farm, where he teaches them about nutrition and offers them tours to see how the food is grown and harvested. Over 150,000 people a year visit the farm. Glenn has continued his family's farming tradition, not just for profit, but as a place for people to understand where their food is grown. He has given so much back to his community in Southern California, but he has also been a force to help relieve the suffering in the wake of the 2011 earthquake and tsunami that hit Japan. That same year, he started a fundraising effort for them called Walk the Farm, which holds events to raise money for the victims of the tsunami. And he's going to tell us a bit about that later today. Glenn also served as the president of the Orange County Optimist Club and made major contributions to the community in that role. I think it's appropriate that he was in the Optimist Club because I think he's an optimist for sure. Welcome, Glenn and Ron, to the show today. We're so glad to have you. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.
So, well, let's dive into it. Tell us about the history of your family farm.
You kind of made alluding that we're preserving the property because we own the property. So the first thing we gotta get straight is I don't own the property.
Oh, okay.
If I own the property here in the middle of Irvine, I ain't silly. I don't think I'd be a farmer.
Okay. Right.
We are leasing that property.
That's very understandable.
But as you said, I'm a third generation Japanese American farmer, a sansei. My grandfather immigrated over in the early 1900s, right? Probably 1901, 1902. I'm not really sure. Have a bad time with family history, but he immigrated over from Hiroshima, Japan, as a farm laborer. And my father was born up in Dinuba, California, Central California.
Right.
And he's what you call a kibe, where he actually studied school in Japan for a while. and came back to the United States.
Oh,
And so eventually
yeah.
start farming with my grandfather. The two of
Okay.
them farmed together, and then of course the war broke out, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But
Yeah.
after he came back to Orange County, I was born in Huntington Beach, California. I never knew anything but the farm. Weekends, holidays, summer vacations, it was always on the farm.
We can
It's really,
identify with that. We grew up in
yeah,
the farm,
it
farming.
was odd that I was never told or said that, is it really never spoken that I was going to take over the farm. It was just kind of understood. I think my dad did a really good job of brainwashing me subconsciously.
All
And
right.
so I was very ambitious. I graduated at Cal Poly Pomona. Actually
Mm.
met my wife there. She's a farm girl from Riverside, small farm.
Oh,
And she never wanted, she's told herself she wouldn't want to marry a farmer because small farms are just notorious for, working the kids and working the family. And she
right.
didn't want that. But I guess I'm such a nice guy. She married me anyways.
Is she Japanese American as well?
Yes, she is. She's also a Sansei, third
Okay.
generation.
Got it.
And it was, we were growing strawberries and tomatoes at the time. And my goal was I just wanted to be a big time farmer. And so right out of college, it was expand, expand, expand. And if you remember back in the 80s, probably late 80s, interest rate was probably about 18,
Oh
19%.
yeah. Yeah.
Unbelievable. And I was a high risk, and we were about 20, 22%, I think it was.
Right.
Had a couple bad years in a row, and wound up having to downsize. And it was kind of, my peers were my dad's uh, farming people, his
Yeah.
age. So
Right.
all my peers were basically 20, 30 years my senior. And me being a family representative, it was really tough to downsize and admit, failure basically.
Right.
So uh, all through the 90s, it was a real struggle. And we didn't want my son to be a farmer because it's so tough. Got a
Right.
stack of credit cards like that.
Oh.
And so the story goes, my son preschool class, we invited him out to the farm, and we give him a pumpkin and tour him around the farm. They're really happy. And next year, some other schools wanted to come, so we started inviting schools to come out, the community service type of thing, charging a few bucks. And the property we were on was all leased property from the Irvine Company at the time.
Okay.
And so 1998, this piece of property that we're on now came available, and it was dedicated open space, so they couldn't put houses on there. So
Oh, so they
we,
can't develop it
yeah,
because of that. Yeah. Right.
yeah. So we took the piece of property we're renting now, and we thought, boy, we gotta make a living here somehow. And these tours were going pretty well during pumpkin season, so we thought we gotta make some money off these kids. And so we put a
Yeah.
wagon ride in, we put a petting zoo in, and then we charged the heck out of them, and they kept coming, and they loved it.
That's
It
great.
was a pretty simple tour. We took them around the farm. We would show them the animals, but they would get a pumpkin. But the big thing is they would get to pick some vegetables right out of the field.
Mm.
And the teachers and parents, because parents came out with them since they're preschoolers, and they just loved it. And we thought when we had that little decline in 2008, we thought, boy, we're gonna lose all our schools and everything. But a lot of schools dropped all their other field trips, and they kept coming to the farm.
Oh,
We had some weekend families coming out, and they that term staycation came
oh,
about
right,
during that
right, right.
time.
Yeah.
So a lot of local families found us, and we actually did fairly well during that 2008 period.
Yeah.
But to finish off the story, uh, we went from all wholesale farming, and in 2008, by 2006, we were all direct retail. We started a
Mm.
CSA program. We sold through our produce stand. We do farm tours, and we have the weekend families that come out. So today, which is kind of sad because I'm a farmer, but probably 70% of our income comes from farm tours and school tours.
Oh, agritourism. So
Agritourism.
Yeah.
And about
Interesting.
20% really come from our produce stand, our CSA program.
Hmm.
And if it wasn't for the agritourism, we wouldn't be farming here today.
Right.
Prices, it's just labor's expensive. When you're paying, we're paying over here $15 an hour minimum wage. And
Right.
so all the other wages have to follow in line. It's really tough to to make it go as a small farmer. So when we didn't want my son to be a farmer, so the problem is by the time he graduated at Cal State Long Beach in 2000 and I think 3 or 4. By the time he graduated, we thought, you know what, there's room for you on the farm now with the agritourism and the way it took off. So he's pretty much running all the agritourism and everything like that, but he doesn't know how to farm. He doesn't know the grassroots of it. And so actually my best friend is doing the farming for me.
What kind of crops do you grow on the farm?
The main crop is pumpkins during pumpkin season.
Okay.
Strawberries my favorite right now, so our main crop now is strawberries.
Yeah.
And then summertime is watermelon and corn.
Okay.
So we base our tours kind of around those 4 different crops because
and they're spaced out. They're
Yeah.
spaced out seasonally perfectly
Absolutely.
for that. Yeah.
And then we grow about 60 other items to fill in for our CSA program.
Okay. On a smaller scale.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's really tough though is still even though we have those other crops and they're for agritourism, we just barely get by. And in fact, we're still in the red by the time pumpkin season comes around September.
Mm.
And it's that 1 month of October where we either make it or not. And you know how October can be: Santa Ana winds, rains. And,
oh, right.
so we can be.
Yeah. So Black Friday is true for you. Sounds like, right? Like a lot of businesses. But anyway, well, that's great. You found a way to keep it going. How many acres do you have there? Is it all conjoined in one? Yeah.
No, we have 3 different farms.
Okay.
One right here is about 30 acres, which only 12 is being farmed. The other 18 is for our parking lot and everything else. We have another 24 acres, different area down the street that we grow the watermelons and corn. And we actually just started leasing another piece of property to grow sunflowers.
Oh,
and
that's good.
Sunflowers are for the Instagram people, to come out and take photos.
Right.
I feel real guilty about that because it's really not growing food; it's growing something for pictures.
Can't you harvest the seeds, the sunflower seeds?
We could, but I don't think it'd be profitable.
It's not worth it. Yeah. Glenn's farm is right at the conjunction of the 5 and the 405 in that area. If you know Southern California and Orange County, Irvine, which, when you drive through there, you would never suspect there would be a farm anywhere around. It's so developed. And, I know that Orange County used to be all strawberry fields back before Disney arrived, but I had no idea there was farms in that area.
Actually there was the story on my piece of property. There was a 100-acre strawberry farm here. My friend Itos, and they were farming it. In 1996, they took it to build a golf course. The county, as part of the property, Irvine Company owned part of the property. So the golf course took 60 acres of it. And this 30 acres that we're farming is what's left of that 100-acre strawberry field. I
noticed looking for the address of your farm that there was a golf course right next to it, and I believe it's called the Strawberry Golf Course or something like that.
Correct, Strawberry Farms Golf Course. So people come down here thinking I own the golf course and I own the property. And it's just, especially nonprofits come up and people looking for donations, and I say, wait, I don't own the property. I don't have any money, so don't bother me.
There used to be a strawberry field right across from Disneyland. Back in the 80s,
farms,
yeah.
There's the last holdout there, and they're doing great stuff with the son of Fujishiga Farms. They're 3rd generation farmers. He doesn't have to farm. They have so much property, and this daughter, his sister, is really has taken over that, and the financial side and the development of the properties. and she's also on the chairman of the board of the Segerstrom Center of the Arts.
Oh, that's a great facility. Yeah.
So she's the first woman of color to hold that position.
Fantastic.
So great for the Japanese American community, what she's done.
Right. Well, tell us more about the broader history of Japanese Americans in agriculture in California.
Asian American Pacific and Islanders Month has a tough sell. It's like they're lumping all the Asians together, and
right.
boy, we're all different. We all have a story.
Yeah,
Morgan Freeman. I don't know if you saw his thing a while back. He said several years ago that Black History Month, we shouldn't have that. I mean, we shouldn't relegate it to 1 month out of the year.
Right.
So it's a great thing, and then when the Asian Pacific Asian, because that involves the Chinese, the Japanese, the Koreans, the Filipinos, the Hawaiians,
most of the world.
Yeah.
With so many diverse cultures, to lump them all together. I've thought about that too. It doesn't seem fair.
Isn't it also East Indians?
I believe so. But it's great. I mean, we all have our background, especially in the as being immigrants into this country. Every country has their story, and obviously the Japanese American story is being in the internment camps, and that's also some of the disconnect between the Japanese Americans that have history here prior to World War II, because immigration was cut off in 1920 or so. The Immigration Act of 1924.
Right.
So they cut off immigration of Japanese, or all Asians actually. And so from 1924 until 1955, I believe, there was no immigration of Japanese. And so the Japanese that came after that, they don't have the history of their relatives, their ancestry being incarcerated in camp. And so there's a little disconnect between then and now. And so that's why I think there's so much, I guess, history preservation going on of the Japanese. And it's not just the Japanese American story. I think most immigrants of that era are really looking into preserving their story, because it's the third generation, fourth generation that are forgetting, and we got to get that down.
I didn't know my mother. I'd never even heard of the internment camp till I was 16. I never learned it in high school. I was shocked when I saw my mom watching a movie, and I'm like, what in the hell are you watching? And she goes, that happened to me. And I'm like, it was jarring.
Cynthia's mother grew up in Washington, state of Washington, and she was in an internment camp as well.
She was Nisei. She was in Minidoka. Where were your parents?
So actually, my parents weren't in camp. They were. My mother was in Utah, and so that was off the exclusion area. So even though they have camps, in Utah and Georgia, she was already living in this area, Utah. There was a small group of Japanese living there, and my father was born on the West Coast, and he was on the West Coast at the time. And so when the Executive Order 9066 came out in February, telling Japanese to get off the West Coast, there was about three-week period there where they allowed the Japanese to leave. If you were sponsored, be able to get a sponsor letter from off the West Coast. So my dad had friends in Utah, and so they were able to get a sponsorship letter, and they moved to Utah. There was about 5,000 to 10,000 Japanese that actually voluntarily left the West Coast. And then after a certain point in time, they cut that off, and it says, if you're Japanese, you have to stay, and you can be put in camp. But it's the same thing. My dad, it's whatever they could take in their car. Fortunately, they had a truck, I believe, and they were able to take, at least some of their equipment with them, take what they could carry. And so he moved out to Utah, and actually that's where he met my mother, and they got married. And my oldest sister was born in Utah.
What year was your father born?
Dinuba, Central California.
No, what year?
Oh, what year? 20 around 1920, 21, something like that.
Okay, so my mother was born in 26, and
Oh,
I worked for Dole before I came on with Teresa, ripening bananas, and I'd gone to Utah and met. Ironically, the client was Japanese, and a couple conversations into it, he was also interned in Minidoka and went to high school with my mother.
oh, small world, small world.
Yes,
Wow.
yes. So he did not I don't know if he moved to Utah after, but
I just saw a story the other day. There was a group from San Francisco, I believe, and I think he was a Chinese produce broker. He might have been Japanese, and might have been Chinese produce broker. Had about 100 growers, Japanese growers working for him. So when notice of evacuation came out, he talked to the governor of Utah and says, "Hey, I got this group of farmers. I want to come to Utah and I want to farm and grow vegetables and will you take us in? I promise these are upstanding citizens and they're not going to do anything." And so he convinced the governor. They signed them up, and so his group of 100 farmers went to it's Keatley, Utah, and they went there and farmed. And the produce guy told his farmers, "You guys better be good, otherwise, I'm gonna get my butt chewed out by the governor." But so they were just recently have a monument there now. There's a sign dedicating that to him. It's not taught in high school or in our school, so that's why there are all these organizations promoting the 442, promoting internment camp. A lot of these organizations that's our focus, and I think it's really important that when I talk to people, it's not trying to think that our history is any better than any other nationality or any other ethnic group. It's our story. It's our story and what happened to us. So we have to, if the schools aren't going to teach it, we have to have it available and teach the students and the public that we can.
You have this great website, walkthefarm.com, I think it is, which has a large section documenting a lot of the Japanese American farming families. And it's really interesting. I got a chance to go through some of them. Can you tell us about some of the more prominent or successful families before the war or after the war? And how they did?
Yeah, so it's kind of neat. The reason we started this site is that again, everybody's preserving now. There's a big thing on preserving oral history and video history, and a lot of that it's really wonderful, but it takes time and money and people going out and sending a crew out to videotape or whatever. And so I thought we need an easier way of doing it, and so we came up with this thought. Well, let's just have families submit photos in their own story. So we on the website we have an easy portal there where you just sign up and send your photos in your story. But what's tough is getting people to submit those stories still. It's like pulling teeth, but it's really great. We're trying to make it simple, and everybody has a great little story to tell. And some people say, well, I don't know anything about my history, which is great in itself to put that up there in print to say, I wish I did, but I don't. So we got something like that. In fact, one of the questions that you asked me, which one is my favorite? And I kind of looked at it was actually my mother's because I didn't write my mother's history up there. It was one of my cousins, and so he had things up there that I didn't know about. So it's really interesting stuff that I get the end result. So I have all these photos up at my farm actually. And I get to see people looking at them. You know, it chokes me up.
Yeah. You built a memorial, kind of a monument on your farm, I read, and it looks like it's really been very, very moving for a lot of people.
It's not, it's nothing special. It's just these collages up there, and it's very simple.
I
Kind of
would
like
love
my tours on the farm.
Yeah.
Our farm tours are really simple. I look out there, I say, gosh, we need signage, we need, you know, statues or something, but we always keep it very simple where there's nothing out there. I always forget that when people come to the farm, that it's something new and special to them, but to me, it's just every day.
Right.
These
Well, that's
photos,
fitting with Japanese culture, isn't it? I don't want to stereotype, but I love Japanese art and culture. It's very usually minimalist. It's very zen, like a zen garden.
simplistic.
Bonsai trees, you know.
I'll correct you. That's bonsai tree, not
Bonsai.
bonsai. It's
I'm sorry.
bonsai.
Bonsai. I'm sorry.
But yeah, they're very simple. They're intricate. I was just fortunate to come back from Japan, visiting some of the farmers that Walk the Farm supports. Walk the Farm was started after the tsunami in 2011, and we started the fundraiser Walk the Farm. And it's just a simple thing. It's a walk around my farm. We sample fruits and vegetables. Ron, you're a great supporter of that. But again, really simple. And we've wound up over the years now. We've sent over $1 million to farmers in Japan.
Wow.
We've been supporting farmers over there in different ways. We've scholarship college students. We supported one farmer in particular that was a great story. It was he went after the disaster. This farmer, or he wasn't a farmer at the time. He was about a 23, 24-year-old worker in the city, and he went over to help clean up the disaster. And he was so moved that he quit his job in the city and went and taught himself how to be a farmer.
Wow.
He's been there 9, 10, 11 years now. We support him 5 years, and he's still just squeaking out. He might be able to be self-sustainable now.
Wow.
But there are great stories like that where out of a disaster, things people are moved and they come call to action. They come to help out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is a great story.
There are people that want to go see the area, and not to exploit the disaster, but to show people how resilient they are and what they've done. It's inspiring. I mean, many people are over there. We hear they're still grateful and amazed that people still think about them.
Yeah.
And I think that is part of the thing that we do.
Right. Well, it's interesting there. I didn't make this parallel until now, but I think I read a quote from you in one of the articles you sent me where you talked about the Japanese concept of gaman. Am I saying that right?
Yeah. Gaman.
Which you, at that point, were referencing it in reference to the coming out of the internment camps and being resilient. It's a concept of resilience. I'll have you explain what it is, but it seems like it fits this earthquake tsunami thing as well. Can you tell us about that concept? And
yeah, it's and it's not just to the Japanese Americans, but when you relate to camp, and now please forgive me if I say concentration camp, because a lot of people will say that's what it is. When the Japanese were, forced into relocation camps, they were basically concentration camps.
Right.
And to suffer through that for 3-4 years, I call it. It's called, what we say in America is a grin and bear it. You suffer through it. You hold your head up high. And you do what you have to do. Before the gaman, which you say even with the disaster and tsunami disaster, is what they're doing through. They're suffering through it. They're forging ahead. They're doing what they need to, and they're not complaining about it. They're just doing it. And they are. Then nobody's complaining over there. The concentration camps, yeah, you had some uprisings. Of course, you have some individuals, but on the whole, the thought process of the Japanese, the term for that is shigata ganai. And you start with shigata ganai, basically meaning it is what it is. You can't help it. And so after that is gaman, you grin and bear it. So shigata ganai is you can't help it. This is how it is. And gaman, you bear through it and you do what you can.
And when I read my mother's journal, it was their contribution to America to show support and to go quietly. And
Cynthia has some of the things that her mother wrote in her journal will bring you to tears. She's been reading some of it to me, and it's just really moving. But I think this was the quote that I read from you, that gaman is enduring the seemingly unbearable with patience and dignity. I just love the way that was phrased. But grin and bear it is that's good too.
Yeah, I'm sure that quote, I stole it from somebody. But you talk about where we come, some of the facts that I had written down was by 1910, about half of the 72,000 Japanese were engaged in agriculture. That was in 1910. Of those, about 6,000 were independent or mostly tenant farmers. Also by 1910, LA County, 80% of the strawberry acres farmed by Japanese.
Wow.
By 1917, the average production for California farms averaged $42 an acre. The Japanese farms averaged $141 an acre.
Wow.
So yeah, that part of that led to the yellow peril. The Caucasian farmers, I'll say, but they were a little jealous of the Japanese farmers. But the Japanese farmers were farming really hand-intensive, labor-intensive crops.
Yeah.
By 1917, Japanese farmers produced 10% of California's crop value. And by 1942, when the war broke out, the Japanese farmers produced 30 to 40% of California's truck farms.
Wow, that's amazing.
Now, those numbers, these kind of numbers are arguable, maybe. I have a note here that 1920, the Japanese, there was a league called the Japanese Exclusion League of California, organized by McClatchy, and he was once the publisher of the Sacramento Bee and director of the Associated Press. And McClatchy says, not on the basis of prejudice, he claimed, but because the Japanese were superior workers and thus an economic threat. And so, it was like that, and those things, the Japanese being highly motivated, as all new immigrants are. Every new immigrant is going to be harder working because they need to be and have to be. So there's that jealousy, and like you said, that was a big part of a big role in getting the Japanese off the West Coast. We talk about, there's a lot of great stories about when the Japanese were interned, and the ones that had property, what's going to happen to it. Some that were being made payments to, or was still had a loan. Well, when they go to camp, they got no income. So how do they make those payments? There are some great stories where property was looked after by the neighbor. Loans were being paid by the neighbor, and actually, profits were being directed, to that family that was in camp.
Wow.
But there were many more where they were taken advantage of. They never got their property back. Silver pennies on the dollar. But yeah, we can't forget those good stories. But we also got to remember there was a lot of damage that was done. Yeah.
My grandparents, they weren't born here, so I'm not certain if they were ever citizens. But they had 80 acres in Fife, Washington. So a lot of the blueberries and strawberries, like all those fabulous berries. But my late auntie had said that when they went to Idaho, it was in the middle of a desert, and the Japanese were able to coax different crops to be able to grow there. So even in an arid area, they were still successful in farming.
Wow. So all these internment camps, all these concentration camps that were located in desolate areas, most of them were tamed and farmed by the Japanese that were interned there, growing crops to feed themselves and excess to feed the public. So
wow,
they were doing their part.
Ron, you have any thoughts on what we talked about today? You've got so much information too. Let me remind our listeners, Ron was on our podcast a year ago for, again, the Asian. We want to have him on more, not just for Asian Heritage Month, but we had him on, and he talked about his Japanese Americans in the fresh produce and floral industries. He's got a Facebook group and does a lot of collecting of info there. So sorry, just wanted to remind our listeners.
No problem. Yeah, the only thing I wanted to bring up, which was so honorable, is that the Niseis fought in the military.
Oh, that's right.
Right, to prove their loyalty.
Just for our listeners, Nisei second generation, right?
Second generation.
Yeah.
So most of my wife's family, my family, we had uncles who were in the military, intelligence, and of course,
the suicide missions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the 442s, 100 battalions, they were like the Delta Force, but highly decorated to prove that they're citizens, even losing everything. It was terrible.
I think you're alluding to, they were the most highly decorated unit of their size, and they still are to this day. But so an interesting story is it really started in Hawaii. I think it's the 100th Battalion, I believe, and so it was made up of a lot of Japanese Hawaiians, Japanese American Hawaiians. Now over there were so many Japanese over there that they couldn't intern all of them. And so when the executive order came out, I think there was one camp there that held, I'm not sure, it was 10,000 or something like that. And there was 30, 40,000 that were still out. They were never interned because they were too vital to the economy and this and that and the other thing. And so the call came out to form this 100th Battalion, and it was made up mostly of Japanese from Hawaii, Japanese American from Hawaii. So when they wanted to build the 442, they brought them out to the States, and they called out put the word out to the people in camp, in the concentration camps in the United States, or on the mainland, and they received thousands of people who wanted to volunteer, even though their family's incarcerated. They thought that if they would go fight for their people, for the country, that they would, obviously do better for their families in camp. So they created the 442. They have the Japanese Hawaiians, which talk a totally different language. They call pidgin, right? Pidgin,
right.
Because they're made up of Filipino and Portuguese and a whole mix over there. So they have this company over here working with now these volunteers from the mainland, Japanese Americans from the mainland. And they were fighting all the time amongst themselves. They couldn't get along. They were just constantly. And then there came a point where they thought they may disband this 442nd because they're fighting. They can't get along. And I think it's Senator Daniel Inouye. I'm not sure what part he played in that, but he was in there, where they decided to take the group of the Japanese Hawaiians to go visit one of the concentration camps where the mainlanders' families were. And so they're on a bus ride, they're playing their ukuleles, they're on their way to camp and having a good time. And they come up to the camp and they see these rows and rows of barracks, and they're thinking, gosh, what are we doing at this, at this military installation? Because it's barbed wire, it's guarded by military men, and then they drive in, and it's a family. When I turned 60, when I turned 60, I cry at everything. Emotional.
That's all right.
The Hawaiians finally realized their families. Hey, Ron, you can finish it up.
Yeah. Oh no, they were shocked. And 442, all these guys volunteered, and their family were behind barbed wire, lost everything. So that's what molded them together.
Wow.
Yeah. The most highly decorated, right?
Right.
So one of the great stories of the unit is there's several wonderful stories, but you go to France now, and I believe it's France. France or Italy?
France.
Where every year the 442, they're recognized, they're celebrated, and they celebrate them more than we do here, in the United States. But in fact, Texas. So one of the stories is the 141st Texas Regiment, 275 men, were surrounded by Germans. They were tried to be rescued by a couple of attempts earlier, and the 442 came about on just a couple of days of rest after continuous fighting in other areas of France. And after a couple of days rest, they were dead tired. They were called in to try to save this battalion. They called it the Texas Lost Battalion.
Yeah.
And they forged ahead. In short, they suffered over 440 casualties to save 270 men. That's at one point they were outnumbered 4-1.
Wow.
And so Texas governor made all these men official Texas residents, but they were just loved by the Texans and are not forgotten.
Right.
And so that and I guess the final part of their reach of this was the scaling of the German Gothic line, where they scaled up this 3,000-foot mountainside in darkness to surprise a launch attack. And it was climbing this mountain in the dark with no safety harnesses or anything like that.
Wow.
And they had instances of men falling off the cliff and not saying a word, because if they screamed, they would, their position would be known.
Oh, man.
Wow.
Stories like that.
That's great stories. Great story.
Yeah, the first time I heard that, chills.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
They fell to their death in silence. 8 years of posting stories. So whenever I talk to Sanseis, third generation Japanese Americans, they all say the same thing. The parents rarely talked about their experience. And I have a friend who actually started to dig deeper. Like I kind of expressed this on the last year podcast, that he started to dig too deep, and they got the look from the parents like, stop.
Oh.
So a lot of history was buried because that's the way they wanted it. That's the way they planned it. So in Cynthia and Glenn's defense, because I felt guilty too, but then I realized, even more so is the reason why I'm motivated to keep on learning. Glenn's walk the farm is what he's doing with history is really, really important.
Yes, please, listeners, check it out. Is it walkthefarm.com or .org?
.org.
Also, check out tanakafarms.com. If you're in the Southern California area, you need to go visit Glenn's beautiful farm and learn some things. Take your kids there, especially. They've got a lot of great activities. Constantly, I was looking at the calendar. They've got something going on almost every day, geared mostly towards kids, but the adults will enjoy it too. So Tanaka Farms, TANAKA farms.com.
So I'd like to come out in a couple weeks. Does that mean that you're going to put me to work, like harvesting any kind of?
Put to work. Hey, make sure you call. Make sure you call me when you come out. Glenn at
Absolutely.
TanakaFarms.com. Yeah, very
Teresa
nice.
has something she wants to present to us, and we have a segment on every episode called Homegrown.
I got to remember to groan.
Yeah.
Yes, but Edwin, you generally will apologize in advance.
Yeah. So Teresa loves her puns, and so she always comes up with a pun to tell us and amuse us at the end of each episode. So Teresa's going to do it. I'm going to introduce her right quick. Okay, Produce Buzzers podcast fans, it's time for your favorite segment on the Produce Buzzers podcast. Yes, it's time for Homegrown. It's time for Teresa to punish us again with one of her puns. Teresa, what is the homegrown this week?
Well, Glenn, as a strawberry farmer, you know that strawberries are extremely delicate. They can't ship unless the packaging is just right. And you remember those green baskets that they used to ship, and they get cuts and bruises. But we've discovered a way to fix damaged strawberries. And do you know how you fix a damaged strawberry?
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, we always try to guess these before she gives us the answer, but that was a good answer, Glenn.
Yeah.
How do you fix
That's not the right answer. Not the right answer, though. I take it.
I think that's
No,
the right
that's
answer,
one
but
solution. Yeah.
it's not going to be a pun. But so did anybody else have any ideas? Ron, you have an idea how you fix a damaged strawberry?
Straw on strawberry.
I thought you were gonna say like grin and bury it.
Very good.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Rick,
Well,
no
they used to
idea.
Put,
I haven't got a clue.
Okay.
Ron used to what?
well, I think they used to, for transport, they used to put straw on the bottom of containers and put strawberries in there.
Really?
I believe I think this is a long time ago.
They used to do that for watermelons before they put them in bins. They put them, packed them with straw in the middle. Okay, Teresa, you're going to have to tell us we're ready to grind.
So how do you fix a damaged strawberry? With a strawberry patch.
That's terrible. Glenn's applauding. Glenn, have you no dignity?
I'll have to use that one on the tour.
Japanese, being polite.
That's just right for our kids on the tour.
Yeah, they'll love it.
Can I steal that from you?
You may. Yes.
Okay, we should probably sign off, let you gentlemen get back to your busy lives. And we should move on too. So thank you so much, Glenn and
Edwin,
Ron.
thanks for the plug there at the end. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
What a pleasure.
I hope you get overrun now by.
You notice he didn't say what you were going to be overrun by.
All right, good luck with your rest of your program. I heard some of your programs, listened to them.
Great. Thank you. Tell your friends about it. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I really appreciate it.
Thank you,
Okay.
guys. Bye, Glenn. Thank you.
Bye, Glenn.
Thanks a lot.
Bye,
Bye, Ron.
Ron.
Thanks,
Thank
Ron.
you.
Bye, everyone.
Well, thank you, listeners, for tuning in to the Produce Buzzers podcast, brought to you by Produce Buzz, the gathering place for lovers of fresh fruits and veggies. We hope you were entertained a bit and educated a lot about fresh produce. Be sure to join us next time, and please tell your friends to do so as well. Like, share, and comment on our Produce Buzz Facebook page, and check out our website at www.producebuzz.com. There you will find articles about fresh fruits and veggies, how to select, store, and prepare them, as well as lots of interesting facts about all the wonderful bounty the earth provides for us. Until next time, be fruitful and don't forget to veg out.